As you can see, these questions were asked by postdoctoral students. That's why they are very difficult. I don't know where we start. The Soviet Union, I'm starting with the last. During the Second World War, the Soviet Union lost at least 20 million people, 25 million people during that war, maybe 30 million. As you can see, this was an enormous sacrifice in the struggle to defeat Nazism. Of all of the countries that were involved in that war, the Soviet Union is the one that lost the greatest number of people. Therefore, there is a great sensitivity. The Soviet Union is no more, but talk now about the Russian Federation. A very great sensitivity about issues of war and peace. Because I'm saying of the sacrifices that the country made during the Second World War. Winston Churchill raised this thing. It was strange that it was him. But as they were building the EU, what became the EU, Churchill raised this matter and said, you Europeans were working on what, as I say, became European Union, be mindful of the fact that the security of the Soviet Union is very important because of the losses they suffered during the war. Now, I'm mentioning that because when at some point, as the Soviet Union was about to collapse, issue of the normalization of the relations between when Gorbachev was still at the head of government state in the Soviet Union, in its discussions with the West, with Reagan and others, question of relaxation of tensions between these two camps and so on arose. And in the end, one of the decisions that was taken was that there would be a unification of Germany, the two Germanys. And the commitment that was then made by the Western countries that the West Germany would remain part of, well, Germany would remain part of NATO, but NATO troops would not go anywhere east. So that even if those East Germany becomes part of Germany, you would not have NATO troops there. It relates to the matter about the sensitivity, about the security question of the then Soviet Union. But in the end, that agreement between the East and West about the NATO borders not going anywhere further east, that matter changed. So that in the end, the question then arose, even 2008, there was some NATO conference where a resolution was taken to say that even a country like Ukraine and Georgia, which shared borders with the Russian Federation, were perfectly at liberty to join NATO. Putin raised, there was the you would remember the Munich Security Conference takes place in Munich on security. Putin raised this matter in 2007 to say that the security of the Russian Federation was very important, and countries of the East and West must handle this matter, bearing in mind that there are security concerns of that kind. To cut a long story short, when the conflict that you referred to, you talk about 2022, it's around this question, where the Russian Federation are saying they would never ever agree that you would have NATO troops in Ukraine on their border. Because I'm saying of this preoccupation with this matter of security. The Russians, the Russian Federation offered all sorts of solutions to NATO, to the US, about how this matter could be handled. But there was an insistence on the NATO side that the Ukraine had every right to apply for membership of NATO. So you then end up with a situation where NATO troops would sit on the border of the Russian Federation. That's what caused the war. But that war had started not in 2022. It started in 2014, when the then the democratically elected president of Ukraine was removed virtually by coup d'etat. You'd remember the way the Western countries welcomed that change. That then the conflict broke out with the eastern provinces, what is the Donbass now, of Ukraine, refusing to accept that coup d'etat, that change of government. So the war started then. You would have seen the statements made by Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande 2 years back, where they said that, you remember there was negotiations at Minsk to resolve the conflict that was taking place in eastern Ukraine. And the Minsk agreement was agreed. Both Angela Merkel and Hollande said that actually that was, they did that in order to buy space for the government of Ukraine to arm itself. They're not genuine about that agreement. So in 2014, the NATO countries then pay attention to this matter of building up the military capacity of Ukraine. So in the eyes of the Russians, the reason we are building up the military capacity of Ukraine is to make sure that indeed you can then impose this thing about the membership of NATO with a strong military Ukraine that can defend itself. So,
are you from Nigeria, Ghana, or Kenya, and you are searching for ways how you can make a living online?
So in the end, the Russian Federation felt that if the only way to stop that process, which would lead to Ukraine becoming a member of NATO and the placement of NATO troops on the border of Russia, was indeed to start the military operation in 2022. Yeah. That is why around this whole discussion of this matter, this issue about multipolarity has arisen very sharply. Because it is about this issue. There's a matter that's not discussed very often here. with regard to this issue. It is what is called in the US the Wolfowitz doctrine. Paul Wolfowitz, a Republican, at some point he made a proposal. It was after the collapse of the Soviet Union that the US should never allow that any country in the world should be so influential that it threatens any interest of the US. And the paper leaked that proposal, and it was attacked even by the New York Times. This is too imperialist and all that. But that concept has never left US national security policy. So that is why you would find a lot of people in the United States will say the war in Ukraine was in fact a US war against Russia, using the Ukrainians. The purpose was to defeat the Russians so that it's like they want to defeat the Chinese, to make sure there's no power in the world, as Wolfowitz said, who would challenge the interests of the US. I'm saying that is why you find the discussion about multipolarity. Now, our country takes a position that it is non-aligned. It's correct. It's a correct position. It's not aligned with Ukraine. It's not aligned with Russia on this matter. And they are saying that to be a peaceful resolution of this issue. And that resolution cannot avoid discussing this matter about a multipolar world. Because it lies at the heart of the conflict in Ukraine. The Russians would never, ever agree that Ukraine should become a member of NATO. I am saying, bear in mind, these are people who lost 25, 30 million people during the Second World War. And I don't imagine NATO will want to change its position to say anybody who wants to apply for join to membership of NATO, they are free to do so. So in the end, I'm saying this conflict, my view, is that this war in Ukraine can only be resolved, ended, in the context of a discussion about this multipolar issue. The positions taken by the South African government about non-alignment between the two belligerents is fine. It's correct. But in the end, the solution has got to be between the true belligerents. I hope that answers your question. We support, I'm talking now about the ANC. We supported the proposal about a two-state solution with regard to Israel and the Palestine question. This was in support of a position that had been taken by the PLO as a representative of the people of Palestine. You would remember that there was a conference in Oslo some years back, which was between the Israelis and the Palestinians to discuss what to do about the conflict between the two of them. It's out of that conference that there was a decision, okay, let us then have a two-state solution. And as part of that process of forming a two-state solution, the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. I'm saying we supported that proposal about the two-state solution because that was the proposal of the Palestinians themselves. We said we agree. We support your position on this. You remember we had, there was a proposal here for a two-state solution also here. which we refused. You remember they wanted, some of the Afrikaners wanted a folk state. So there must be formed a folk state somewhere in South Africa. So we have that state and then you have South Africa. We said no. But I'm saying in this case, when the Palestinians themselves said the two-state solution, we said we'll support you. Practically what has happened with regard to that is that, this thing that they talk about, facts on the ground. Effectively what has happened is that the possibility for the establishment of two states, I think, has ceased to exist. Because of the way the Israelis have handled this matter. If, for instance, you take the occupation, the settlements on the West Bank, practically the physical possibility for the establishment of two states, I think, has ceased to exist. And recently you saw what the Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, that in any case he is opposed to a two-state solution because you can't establish, he says, by definition, if you had a Palestinian state, sovereign and all that next door, it would be hostile to Israel. So he said quite plainly they are against a two-state solution. And as part of the reason, the approach towards this conflict in Gaza of the Israelis has been to, if we can chase away these Palestinians to go and live somewhere else, it'd be better. So that Gaza then becomes part of Israel. I think the possibility practically for a two-state solution at the moment is not possible. And yet we can't continue to allow the situation where the rights of the Palestinian people are disrespected. So we're stuck with a conundrum. You will have seen as the most recent decisions, for instance, of the International Court of Justice, where the International Court of Justice have said that these settlements, for instance, on the West Bank, are illegal. The occupation of what was Palestinian land post-1948 is illegal, according to the International Court of Justice. But the Israelis are completely ignoring whatever the ICJ says. So I'm saying we're stuck with a situation where the rights of the Palestinians are not being addressed, and the possibility to address them in the context of a two-state solution, I think, ceases to exist because of the behavior of the Israelis. So what is going to happen? I think we're in a situation of a conflict which won't end. And I think any attempt to persuade the Palestinians not to fight for their rights will fail. So the Palestinians will continue to fight for their rights. And I imagine the Israelis will continue to talk about self-defense. So what is to be done? I don't know. I really honestly don't know. I think we should ask the Palestinian colleagues need to answer that question. One of the unfortunate things that has happened, it seems to me, you've had a virtual disappearance of the PLO. So, who speaks for the Palestinian people? That becomes a question. The People's Republic of China has just done a very, very good thing of convening all of the Palestinian factions in Beijing and saying to them, You must come together as a people and pursue. So there's an agreement among themselves, the Palestinians, reached in Beijing, that they will then come together and maybe reconstitute the PLO or whatever decision they take. Because at the moment, we don't have this one voice of the Palestinians to pose this question that you're posing to me, to say to them, what is your future? What do you say about yourselves? Gaddafi, for many years, Gaddafi said he was against this two-state solution because he thought it'd never work. Let's have a one-state solution so that the Palestinians and the Israelis, everybody, the Jewish community and the Palestinians, they get together and live in one country as we live in one country. That proposal, of course, would be unacceptable to people like Netanyahu. We've seen the attempt to define Israel as a Jewish state. You've got Palestinians who are Israelis. But they want to attach this particular description to Israel if they can, as Netanyahu is saying, if we can chase away all of these Arabs in Gaza and in West Bank and take over these territories. That will be his solution. So I'm saying, colleagues, I think hopefully the Palestinian leadership will tell us what it is that needs to be done in this situation. Because the answer to that question is not very easy. The situation definitely on the ground is against the notion of a two-state solution. We all repeat the call for two-state solution, but in practice, I think the possibility to bring it about is not there. And as I've said, Netanyahu has said, in any case, over his dead body, there will be no two-state solution. Yeah. And as far as I know, we are not about to withdraw from the ICC. The position I think that we've taken, which was that we should act on the matter of the ICC together with the rest of the African Union. And what the African Union was about was not withdrawing from the ICC, but changing various parts of the Rome Statute. And I think that is the South African position. The matter about the gender issue is correctly raised. Some time back, I was asked to speak at the University of Venda on this question. And the central point I tried to make there was, there's a critical matter that we face as a government, and I think as a country, which is called gender mainstreaming. That to deal correctly in a manner that's going to produce the results that we need, we have to engage in this gender mainstreaming. I give you a simple example. Because I was talking at the university, I used a university example. Take women lecturers. Because they are women, they get pregnant and give birth to children. So during this impacts their capacity At some point, you got to take maternity leave. It's not binding on the men to take paternity leave, but it's binding on the women to take paternity leave. And in many cases, impacts on their possibilities for promotion. Impacts negatively on that. So one university in the United States says, as part of the response to this question, as part of the response, they will establish a creche, a kindergarten, on the grounds of the university, so that this woman lecturer who's given birth to a child does not have to drive home for breastfeeding, and they are losing time, but they must breastfeed at the university. I'm saying it's with particular intervention to say, mainstream the issue of women's empowerment within everything that you do. The Vice Chancellor of UNISA is sitting with us here. I don't know if this university is mainstreaming the gender question. I think it's a critically important part so that you can say, with regard to anything and everything that you do, take the question of leadership that you are raising. A part of our experience here has been, if you take elections, there's a lot of resistance on the part of the population to elect women to be their representatives. That's why the matter of quotas becomes important. For instance, in our own system here, fortunately, we've got this proportional representation system. So an organization can then say 50% of our candidates will be women. And it becomes possible then to have whatever number you get elected, 50% or whoever is elected are women. But if you had a different system, let us say you had a constituency system, first past the post and all of that, you would probably find that where you have women candidates standing for this particular constituency, that constituency, the likelihood of getting to that 50% will be very difficult. You need to look just at local government elections, where you have ward systems, ward representatives. I'm quite certain if you look at who are these councillors who get elected on the ward system, is majority men. You compensate it by using the proportional representation system by saying then on the proportional side, we'll put women candidates. So I'm back at my gender mainstreaming. Therefore, that when we do anything and everything that we do, we should say, what is the gender policy with regard to whatever it is that we're trying to do? I think this is the only way to deal with this issue. And the Pumsley is correct. I mean, the fact that you would have a woman elected as president or whatever doesn't mean necessarily that you're addressing the gender issue. This woman might indeed be president or whatever, but the condition of the woman doesn't change. The provision of clean water. I was born in the rural areas and grew up in the rural areas. There was no clean water with a tap. You had to fetch water from the river. So in our area there, some of the water would prefer you'd get a drum and then put it on a sleigh and get cattle to drag the sledge. But in many instances, you have women with buckets on the head. So when you say, let's solve this water problem, the piped water within 50 meters of every home, whatever, you make a very, very big impact on women. To take away the responsibility from women to be carrying water from the river. It might be more important than many other interventions you make. That also relates to firewood, the fetching of firewood, which in many rural areas was a women's issue. Where you say, well, let's supply electricity must be available. Fortunately, ESCOM is working well. You are addressing this issue of taking particular burdens of women. That's a process of the empowerment of women. I'm saying that's part of the gender mainstreaming. I think this is what we need to educate South Africa about. If we're addressing the matter about emancipation of women, equality, and all of that, let indeed be, I'm saying mainstream this issue. Not an additional, this is our policy, but in addition to this, no. The gender-based violence matter, I've been saying to people that this country, for some reason, is exceedingly violent. Exceedingly violent. The levels of violence in this country against a person are too high. If you look at particular age cohort, I think maybe up to the 29 years or something, you'd find that the biggest cause of death is unnatural causes. Unnatural causes, single biggest. Violence. And so if you take a particular age cohort like that, you'd find the number of young men who get killed is intolerably high. Within that group, you then find women being killed intolerably high. I'm saying, therefore, my view, we must indeed address this matter about gender-based violence, but we must also address the matter of violence to create the social context within which you can more effectively address the question of gender-based violence. You can't address it. You must continue to address it. But you can't hope to produce the kind of outcome that we need to have if you don't deal with the rest of the violence in the society. You just have a look at the Stats SA figures about causes of death and mortality and all of that. You would see this thing, it stands out very clearly that the level of violence against a person in this country is much too high. And look at young men who die from unnatural causes, which is violence. Intolerably high, but the country does not discuss it as though it's okay, it's allowed. Gender-based violence must be addressed within the context of addressing the violence in society as a whole. How do we do it? I don't know. What is it? What do we say? You know, the very first judgment of the Constitutional Court you recall, was a judgment which prohibited capital punishment. A very important judgment in my view, because it argued this new South Africa that is being born must have as one of its big values respect for life, so that even the state has no right to take away the life of anybody. Respect for life as a distinguishing feature of the new South Africa. In the practice, the opposite is true. What do we do as a society to change the public mind so that indeed we support the position that was taken by the Constitutional Court about the value of human life? I don't know. Maybe our postdoctoral students would know the answer to this question. But it's a serious question. The violence in the society, in the context of which you have this gender-based violence, what do we do? And you look at even just a week, last week or something, the police were given the crime statistics for whatever quarter. And they talk about the murder, causes of murder. And the first one is quarrels. The cause of murder. Number one is quarrels. People quarreled and killed one another. What kind of society is that? But are we discussing that as South Africans to say, how do we stop this? There's no such discussion. So that problem is not going to be solved. The gender inequality, as I was saying, I really think that the strategic decision has to be about this gender mainstreaming. When we're discussing what kind of South Africa do we want, this was in the context of CODESA and in all of that. One of the issues that became a big issue of discussion in the movement, in the ANC I'm talking about, was this provision in the Freedom Charter which says, the people shall govern. And so we're saying right now we have this possibility now to draw up a constitution. How do you express that? How do you give effect to that vision, the people shall govern? That is why you have the current system of local government. Because the view was the sphere of government closest to the people is local government. It is at that level that you must give expression to the notion the people shall govern. And you know all of these things that were decided. That I, as a candidate councillor standing in a ward, I must have an IDP, a development program for my ward, which I discuss with the people in the ward, so that the population intervenes in governing itself. Or the ward committees. or constituency committees that were supposed to meet, and the people are. It even says that actively the municipal government must encourage NGOs to participate in this thing. Civil society must feel engaged in this process of the people shall govern. I'm mentioning this because this was a primary area during the period you're talking about. This is a primary issue to which we focused. Let's construct a system of government which gives effect to this notion, the people shall govern. Where shall we do it? Let's do it at the municipal level. As you and I know, it's not working. When we used to do Izimbizo, go around the country, one of the major complaints you'd find in all localities is that these councillors that we elected, we only see them once a year. We elect them, they vanish, they'll come back when they want to be elected again. Completely contrary to what the way the system is set up, even by law. I'm saying that was the focus. The issue that you are raising about effectively ending the system of group areas, liquidating it, deracializing spatially the country. Fundamentally a question of what we do with regard to the economy. It's in the context of dealing with what you do with this economy that you deal with that issue. We don't have time to discuss that. I'm talking about the economic reconstruction of South Africa. But it was in that context that I would say that there will be new cities and new towns, you must then, in that context, make sure that the apartheid special something does not persist in the new areas, but it's conditional on what you do with the economy. You can't resolve it outside of that. That remains a matter that is outstanding, and I'm saying can only be resolved in the context of the restructuring of the South African economy. This is a task that continues to face us. There is the government has been talking for some years now about the outgoing government, not the GNU. Has been talking about the district development model. That this is what is going to resolve the matter about the dysfunctionality of municipalities. That let's do this DDM. When we grew up, there was Mswayan, the traditional medicine. They would call it Uzfozong, and then we would translate it as all diseases. The district development model as a kind of Uzfozong. There is a committee here. It's called the Presidential Economic Advisory Council. That Presidential Economic Advisory Council produced a report in 2020. It's on the internet, on the economy. But the important thing about that report is that it devotes a good part of that report to this matter of the district development model. And to tell you the truth, my estimation is that that's the only presentation there is in the country about what it should be, the DDM. It's in that report. For instance, they will say, the metros, no, let me start somewhere else. The Development Bank, the Southern African Development Bank, is one of the major financiers of local government, and finances also the metros. That should be discontinued, because the metros have got enough strength even to raise money on their own. They can go into the capital markets and raise a bond and get some money. So there's no need for the development bank to be financing the metros. So the development bank must finance the district municipalities. And because it will be putting in significant money in the municipalities, and it must make sure that those district municipalities have the capacity to spend the money properly. So that the bank itself, in order to ensure that the money it gives is properly spent, make sure that the municipality has got the capacity to manage and utilize its funds. Now, there are many practical proposals in that report of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council on the District Development Municipality. I've been trying to say to all of these people of ours in government, read that report. Read the section, because it's so very clear to answer the question that you're asking. What do we do about these dysfunctional municipalities? You see, even if we look at the financing, the revenue sharing system, you have a lot of municipalities which can't finance themselves. So the Constitution will describe various tasks that fall within the sphere of government, but completely impractical, because they don't have a sufficient revenue base to add to whatever comes from the national fiscus. These are things that need to be changed. You find a discussion of that in this chapter. So I'm saying that there is a document which belongs to the president, because this is his advisory council, which deals in detail with what do you do to address the matter of dysfunctionality of municipalities. But I don't think our people in government have read it. I must ask the president whether he's read it. I'm not so sure. So the ideas are there. The ideas are there about how to deal with that dysfunctionality. Bottom-up planning, but bottom-up, I was saying that in terms of planning, at the municipal level, it's in the law, it's a requirement. That when you go down to having a development plan for a ward, so that the council, when it's constituted, puts all of those plans together and says, what do we do? But it's not happening. Part of the reason is that we made a mistake. Again, I'm talking about the ANC. When came 1994, what happened was you took your best cadres and sent them to national government. Your next layer, provincial. Your next layer, local government. You should have reversed that. Your best cadres should have been at local government, because that is the one that's closest to the people and where this development takes place or doesn't take place. At some point, we realized that and said, This is a mistake. So you remember, you may not remember this. Somebody like Ambima Sondo. When a reason Ambima Sondo became mayor of Johannesburg, we pushed him out, pulled him out of parliament and said local government. We're beginning to reverse this so that you, in terms of cadre development that Helen Suzman talks about, we develop some of the best cadres at the local government level so that you change the quality of leadership in that way. But you know, the 2021 local government elections, the ANC decides that it will set up structures to determine who should be in those municipalities where we win. These national structures will participate in the process of selecting the mayors. It was to address this leadership issue. Now, as you know, we may know this. The ANC has got a leadership school, a political school, or THABO school to train in leadership and all of that, and modules, and you finish modules, you get a certificate and so on. So the local government elections take place in 2021. And each of the municipalities where we win is asked, people are asked to supply a short list of 3 people from whom a panel will choose. We'll choose one to address the leadership issue at that level. And one of the things they discovered, so me, I'm in that short list. And one of the things I say about myself, my CV, is I finished 6 modules at the Oliver Tambo School. Which means I'm a well-trained cadre. And then the panel starts asking me questions, which are in those modules. And I can't answer them. And the reason is because what I do, I ask Puleng Lengabul to become THABO MBEKI, to do these 6 courses. She does them and she passes in my name. And I pay 5,000 rand. I'm telling you practically what's happening. So that when THABO MBEKI appears before the panel, he's got a certificate of qualification. But he can't answer the questions that were discussed in the modules because it's Puleng who did the course. This is part of I'm trying to answer your question about dysfunctionality of municipalities. It's of various kinds. The political leadership at the municipalities is a serious problem. And from that flows all manner of things. Why are so many of these municipalities getting these negative Auditor General reports? There was one minister of Kokta who wasn't there, but I'm told he said at an NEC meeting that in reality the funds transferred from the central fiscus to local government can do a lot to address these challenges of service delivery. The problem, he said, I was sitting in a meeting of the NEC, he said, the problem is this money that's allocated to this municipality. Some of it disappears into the pockets of my comrades who are sitting in this meeting. It disappears into pockets of people who are in provincial government. By the time it gets to local government, it's a fraction of what was originally voted. These are some of the practical matters that have got to be addressed with regard to changes in local government. But in terms of ending the apartheid system of spatial distribution of population, I'm saying that is very critically part of the issue of what we do with regard to restructuring of this economy. Professor Ndlovu, that's all the questions. Local, gender, and international. Thanks.